So, a user named Dominic Cash Wojak, which, first of all, congratulations on having the most internet sounding name ever, um, wrote to me and said, I really liked your video about why autistic men should not date, but what are your thoughts on homosexual autistic dating? So, maybe. First of all, I really need to go back and do a follow up on that video series because honestly, it was one of those things where I'm trying to sound like I know what I'm talking about, and the more I talk about it, the less of a grip I seem to have on the issue. And so I've been thinking about the things I said in that video series a lot, and it comes down to not being fully candid about where I'm coming from with a lot of things. And so I think that would help make sense, of a lot of things that I said, and maybe give autistic people some more even-handed advice. Um, Fellow autistic people some more even-handed advice. Anyway, to answer your question, Dominic, I have never been in a homosexual relationship, or anything of that nature. So I really don't have much of a frame of reference from the inside. No hands-on experience with the process, the lifestyle. Pardon me, but I have spent a lot of time hanging out with gay friends, and male and female, and I've been to plenty of group events, parties, and things like that that were predominantly gay. Or going to something one of my gay friends was throwing, and it's a predominantly gay party and that sort of thing. I've been to plenty of things like that. I've hung out at plenty of gay bars with gay friends, with straight friends even. I've hung out around all of that stuff, and been spent, and certainly being in the arts and entertainment industry and the music industry and all of that. Any kind of arts community is going to have a strong alternative lifestyle component to it as well. So I've probably been around it about as much as anyone could be without actually participating. And I'll tell you my observation about it. So, like I said, I can't really speak to the inner workings of it, but I can speak to some surface level things that I think are fundamentally different between gay and straight relationships, and therefore fundamentally different in terms of how autism applies to it. So, with gay relationships versus straight relationships, let's think about the risk factors involved in all of these. Okay, gay male relationships, no risk of pregnancy, but you have the highest risk of STDs. Uh, Heterosexual relationships, uh, you have the risk of pregnancy, and you have a more moderate, more manageable STD risk than what gay men experience. Lesbian relationships, the lowest possible risk of STDs, not gone altogether, but the lowest possible risk, and no risk for pregnancy. And so, it's funny. A lesbian friend of mine a few years ago was talking about, like, oh, I picked up this hot girl last night, and I'm getting so good at this. I'm getting so good at picking up women and all this. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're a beautiful woman picking up other beautiful women in an atmosphere, in a basically consequence free environment. This is not as significant of an accomplishment as when a man is consistently able to go out and pick up women. It's just not. It's not as significant. It's not the same thing. I'm sorry. But made for some interesting stories, I'll tell you that. But anyway, so it's just not the same. And on both the male and female side of homosexuality, the big difference is that there is not this ginormous crossing of the social divide that there is between men and women. Uh, it's been borne out time and again that gay men are the most sexually active and sexually promiscuous of the three demographics. Gay women are the most quick to go rushing into relationships, the quickest to move towards commitment, and that kind of fundamentally underscores the natural divide between men and women on in terms of relationship priorities and relationship goals. And again, that's only that's only talking about the median average. Obviously, there are people on both sides who balance out the bell curve. But speaking to the median average, that's pretty much the case. Pretty much underscores the difference between male and female relationships. Heterosexuality is full of all of these twisted, complicated social norms and social customs and customs of behavior and cultural ideas and modes of thought and approaches and social proofing and that sort of thing, and all of these things that are unbelievably difficult and awkward for autistic people to surmount, for autistic people to deal with. It's just unbelievably difficult and complicated for us to work through. And some of that is sociologically imposed, some of it is biologically imposed. But that's what I tried to get across in that first video on the topic is there's this kind of when heterosexual people, and so many, that video was featured on Thomas Henley's program, and he actually wanted me on the program. We talked about it a little bit. I'd like to be on his program. If nothing else, I'd like to do another video for him to comment on. But I talked about this a little bit, and he responded to this as well, or his viewership. So many people, neurotypical people in his audience were saying, oh my God, I can't believe this guy thinks this is how heterosexual relationships work. It's like, no, I am right about that. You're just not aware of what's going on. But I talked about how there's this thing where, neurotypical people naturally have this thing where they'll have a dialogue with each other while there's another hidden unspoken dialogue that's going on below the surface between the two of them. There's a subconscious dialogue that plays out while the conscious dialogue is going on that does not happen with autistic people. And so much of that is born out of this kind of natural, I think, biological language that men and women have with each other, that nature kind of sets us up to have. And homosexuality does not have that, where, I've seen from firsthand experience or not firsthand, but I guess direct knowledge. I've witnessed firsthand, I should say, how easy it is to hook up on Grindr, how easy it is to hook up at a gay bar, male and female, how just instantaneous and automatic it is, because you have two sexes that are dialoguing with each other in a manner in which where they're not expected to engage in I guess the word will almost be cross-cultural or cross-continental, transcontinental dialogue between themselves and this person that is the biological other, if that makes sense. Like, that whole thing's not there. And so, it's like it's more, I think it's more like just talking directly to someone that is more naturally attuned to your biological urges, your biological desires, values, that sort of thing. Um, it's like I this is going to be a very controversial statement, I'm sure, but it's kind of like every time I've talked to heterosexual women about and even well, honestly, even gay women too, about the difference in sex drive between male and men and women, they're always like, "Oh, I don't think so. I think it's women are just not allowed to express their sexual desires as much as men, but we're definitely just as horny as men." It's like, no, again, the the sheer ratio, the sexual activity of gay men versus the willingness of gay women. Sure, there's hookup culture on both sides, but the willingness of, it's like the old very lame joke. What does a lesbian bring to a second date? A moving van, that kind of thing. Like the versus the willingness of lesbians to hook up together, or literally get together, shack up together, and that kind of thing. It really, really underscores the fundamental, and the rate at which there's LBD in the lesbian community. There's LBD, lesbian bed death. The bed death is the worst in the lesbian is affects the lesbian community the most out of all three, that kind of thing. That demonstrates the difference in the sex drive between men and women. And I tell women, it's like, no, trust me, if you could experience the male sex drive for one day, like the male sex drive, especially at its peak, the male sex drive at like age 17. Oh my God, so much of your perspective on the world would change instantly like that. You'd be like, oh, oh, now I get it. Now I get why men are like how they are. Like, I really do think it would be just a total change of perspective. And that's not trying to slut shame at all, by the way. Individual people have individual proclivities and individual needs, and you do you. But I'm talking about on the grand average of the bell curve and everything. And so it's just a very, very different thing. Uh, anyway, so and a further proof of that would be, to my knowledge, there is no book on, there are zillions of pickup guides for men on how to pick up women in bars. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any published. There may be some blogs or something, but there's not any that I'm aware of published lesbian pickup guide. I mean, it's just not the same thing. Anyway, so the reason I bring all of that up is because I know from observing homosexual hookup culture and everything, that the barrier for entry is very different, and there's much less resistance than there is on for heterosexual couples. And fundamentally, let's be honest, all of that comes down to heterosexuality produces babies, and that's the main consideration. Is if you have a baby, that's going to fundamentally change everything. So especially for the woman, and so that has to be weighed and that has to be considered. And all of this dialogue, you think about something. We now do hookup culture like that I'm describing, is this very, very, very small condensed version of something that uh, go back to the Middle Ages, back to medieval times, and then for centuries forward, really all the way up to just getting into the modern era. You would have all of that, all of those courtship rituals and everything. All of that is a condensing of courtship rituals that used to take months and years of planning and involve negotiations from members of families on both sides and everything before they would ever dare pair two people up together and that sort of thing. Like this was the amount of planning that was necessary was extraordinary. The birth control pill and reliable contraception in general came along in the 20th century, and over the course of the 20th century, male and female relationships became very different. Also, the one of the other big additives to that was the advent of the automobile, and men and women being able to, young men and women being able to go off alone, have a way to get away from everything and that sort of thing. So it gradually shifted it sociologically towards a more just a more individualized one-on-one version of it. And so we've taken all of that and condensed it down into this unspoken dialogue between, what would have previously been these massive contract negotiations between families and evaluations and considerations and all of that would have been is now been condensed down to this very direct process between two people, because the threshold for consequence has been lowered as low as it really possibly can be. And so I think that's where the new that kind of dialogue has emerged, and a lot of this unspoken thing that goes on in the sociology between men and women, neurotypical men and women, is, I really think, an adaptation to an adaptive process in a way that it's something that's evolved over time, and so it's just, and honestly, if I'm rambling a little bit, it's because I need to go to bed and I wanted to knock this one out before I kicked off for the night. But anyway, it's just something that I think is different fundamentally about, it's a different barrier for entry, ultimately. And that's what it comes down to. There is really not, autism, I don't think, is going to be very, I don't think autism is going to present much of a barrier for entry to a demographic, male or female, that has an app where they can go on and search local people in their area who are in that very moment looking for instant gratification sex, send them a text that says, hey, can I suck your dick? And send them they'll have them text back, sure, should I come over to your place or you to mine? And you immediately go over there, and that kind of thing. There's not a lot of sociological conventions to navigate there. It's very one and done. So as far as being the ease with which you can put yourself in certainly a sexually intimate situation, and potentially an emotionally intimate situation too, it's just there's just no comparison. And these are very different concepts. And as much as, don't get me wrong, I encourage everyone to live their best life and find what works for them, fundamentally, on a philosophical level, I'm hesitant to say love is love, because there's so many different factors going on, and there are these default burdens placed on sociological burdens placed on heterosexual couples that I think are invariably going to color how they relate to each other. So I don't think love is the same all across the board. I think it's beautiful and sacred and valuable all across the board, but I really don't think it's experienced quite the same way all across the board. And that's not to say, again, that's not to say that people shouldn't be allowed to live the way they want to. It's just different strokes for different folks, literally. But anyway, so there's that, and then also there's not, in gay relationships, there's a lot more ambiguity with regard to gender roles and that sort of thing. Fundamentally, and I know that we consider ourselves very forward thinking and everything, but fundamentally, Men are expected to take on a great deal of the burden, and the burden of providing for the family and that sort of thing. And so there's a great deal in male female couplings, there's a great deal of emphasis placed on the quality of the man's job and what are his career prospects, how responsible is he, all of this stuff. And the thing is, like, we want to say, it's one of those things where it's like we want to talk about how progressive and forward thinking we are, and we're so enlightened and all of this stuff. But then at the end of the day, no matter how forward thinking and progressive people are, by and large, if the man can't provide for his family, he gets regarded as a deadbeat. There's this idea of like how we would like things to be, and then there's just this automatic default that people fall into, whether they intend to or not. And so those things just aren't there in gay relationships. And honestly, as someone who's only ever had heterosexual relationships, the sociology, the one to one intimacy of homosexual relationships feels more appealing than the one to one intimacy, or seems more appealing than the one to one intimacy in heterosexual relationships. The cynic in me actually thinks that the one on one intimacy in heterosexual relationships is an illusion. It's a shared hallucination that gets you to the point that sets you up to have children, and then they are meant to become the primary recipients of your affection and your love, and you become kind of. And I've had one heterosexual friend after another that's had more relationship experience than me tell me this, is it's like at that point, once you have the kids, they become the ones that you're fixated on in love, and you love, and you have feelings, not sexual feelings obviously, but passionate, overwhelming, powerful emotional feelings for, and your spouse is just kind of this partner that assists you with them. And that's the story I keep getting over and over again. And yeah, you fuck on your anniversary and Valentine's Day, and then that's about it. It's kind of like a nostalgia trip. And so that is where I find myself, what I find myself coming back to with regards to that. Again, I don't know what these things, gay relationships are like from the inside. So I can't, this is all just how it seems to me. I think though the main thing, that the commonality between gay and straight relationships that autistic people have to worry about, though, the big commonality is that you basically is that in any relationship you are opening yourself up to getting manipulated by another person, to getting mistreated and abused and taken advantage of by another person. And as a gay person, as an autistic person, you probably will be more susceptible to that, more susceptible to being abused and taken advantage of, because you're not as good at evaluating people and that kind of thing. And this is where actually, at the risk of sounding like some raging traditionalist or whatever, in this way, this is one of those things where the larger kind of sociological framework around straight relationships, where in more traditional societies where the families can get involved and hash everything out from a neutral, calculating, pragmatic position and everything, they can actually kind of help prevent against some of that. Like gay couplings have more or less always been largely devoid. I'm not aware of any culture that's had arranged gay marriages. I'm sure somebody who lives and breathes this stuff night and day will come tell me, well, actually, the tribe is famous for yada yada yada. But talking about developed first world stuff that the people who watch my videos are going to be dealing with in the developed world and that kind of thing. I'm in that society, in that strata of society and civilization. I'm not aware of any culture that has I'm not aware of any culture that has some kind of like chaperoning tradition around gay relationships. That's always more just been that's always just kind of been tolerated at best. Like, you know, you guys go do your thing over here. Now let's make sure that the uh, heterosexual children are adequately restrained while we sort out what's best for them in the arranged cultures and that kind of thing. And so, in a way, heterosexual autistic people, I think, would probably benefit from that more traditional culture, you know, arranged culture in a way. It's kind of like, as much as I despise love on the spectrum, as much as I regard it as exploitative, in a way, it does help because they will have a whole vetting and screening process for the people that they let get on that show, and so they're going to make sure that the autistic people that they feature on that show are not getting involved with, hopefully not getting involved with someone that's going to manipulate them or mistreat them. And then there's a whole arrangement culture around that of show producers and family and, you know, on both sides and all that that are kind of fulfilling that role, where gay autistic people are not going to have access to that. And that's especially concerning. That's especially something to think about when you stop and think. I heard this somewhere. It was on some infographic YouTube show or something, that something like 70% of autistic people, autistic adults, identify as being on the LGBT, etc. spectrum. So, you know, you think about it, it's actually probably a far more prevalent issue within it's probably a far more autism is probably a far more prevalent factor in all of this than we've stopped to really think about. And so that those are my thoughts. You know, like I said, no real barrier for entry, but the same, you know, less of a barrier for entry, I should say, in terms of navigating social norms, but definitely the same worries about getting involved with the wrong person and getting mistreated and manipulated and that kind of thing. And that's something you certainly want to constantly be on the lookout in any romantic coupling when you're an autistic person. So there you go.